If you're ever offered a ranger position in Yosemite and someone hands you a folded piece of paper before your first patrol, don't throw it away. Don't laugh. And whatever you do, don't tell your supervisor you received it, because officially it doesn't exist. Every new ranger gets the same unofficial rules. Nobody admits writing them. Nobody admits reading them. But the older rangers all know exactly which rule you've broken without you ever having to tell them. I learned that on my fourth night. By then, I'd already broken two. Only one of them was my fault. The other, I don't think I ever had a choice. My name is Daniel Mercer. Until 2 years ago, I thought the scariest part of being a park ranger was telling families that search and rescue had suspended an operation. I'd spent 5 years working at smaller state parks across California. Nothing unusual. Lost hikers, heat exhaustion, the occasional mountain lion sighting. Enough danger to keep the job interesting, but nothing that couldn't be explained. When my transfer to Yosemite National Park was approved, I couldn't stop smiling for weeks. Every ranger wants Yosemite. It's considered one of the crown jewels. Millions of visitors every year. Granite cliffs that seem impossible. Waterfalls taller than skyscrapers. Ancient sequoias older than entire civilizations. It felt like getting promoted into paradise. The drive into the valley proved everyone right. Morning sunlight spilled over El Capitan. Mist drifted through the pines. Families stopped every few minutes just to take pictures. I remember thinking, people spend thousands of dollars to experience this place. I was getting paid to live here. If I'd known what hid between those trees after sunset, I would have turned the truck around before I reached the entrance station. Orientation lasted 3 days. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Emergency medical procedures, wildlife encounters, wildfire protocols, missing person response, visitor safety, radio communication. The instructors were professional, friendly. Nothing about those first 3 days suggested anything unusual until the very end. As everyone packed their bags on Friday afternoon, Senior Ranger Owen Brooks stopped beside my desk. "Mercer, stay behind." His voice wasn't unfriendly, just serious. Once the room emptied, he closed the classroom door, pulled the blind shut, then reached into his jacket. Instead of paperwork, he handed me an ordinary white envelope. No name, no official park stamp, nothing. "Read it later." I frowned. "What is it?" He shrugged. "Something every rookie gets." "Training material?" "No. Advice." "From who?" He smiled faintly. "You'll never find out." Before I could ask another question, he opened the door and left. I waited until I reached my assigned ranger cabin before opening it. Inside was a single folded sheet of notebook paper. Handwritten, no signature. Across the top, in large block letters, someone had written, "You won't find these in the manual." Below it, 7 numbered rules. Rule 1. If another ranger greets you by name before introducing themselves, politely walk away. Rule 2. Never answer a radio call that begins with your own voice. Rule 3. If every animal around you suddenly becomes quiet, remove your hat immediately and don't speak until the silence ends. Rule 4. Do not count tents after midnight. Rule 5. If a visitor asks where the lower valley is, tell them you don't know, even if you do. Rule 6. Never spend longer than 60 seconds looking toward Half Dome after dark. Rule 7. If you ever see a ranger wearing a gray uniform, pretend you didn't. I laughed. Actually laughed. It read like something teenagers would pass around campfires. A local legend. Some harmless tradition for new employees. I folded it back up and stuffed it into my backpack. For a few hours, that's exactly where it stayed. Saturday was my first field assignment. Owen partnered with me for trail familiarization. He'd worked Yosemite for almost 20 years. Tall, broad shoulders, gray beard. The kind of man who could carry an injured hiker down a mountain without complaining. He knew every trail, every campsite, every rock formation. Visitors loved him, kids especially. He always carried hard candy in one pocket for frightened children. Around lunchtime, we stopped near a scenic overlook crowded with tourists. Families posed for pictures. Climbers studied the cliffs through binoculars. Everything felt wonderfully ordinary. Then a little girl tugged on Owen's sleeve. She couldn't have been older than 8. Excuse me, my daddy says the lower valley is prettier. Can you tell us how to get there? The smile disappeared from Owen's face. Instantly, he crouched until he was eye level with her. Where did your father hear that? She pointed toward the trees. That ranger. Both of us turned. Nobody stood there. Only forest. When we looked back, the little girl's father was already calling her. She ran off happily. I expected Owen to shrug it off. Instead, he quietly asked, "Did you answer?" "What?" "The question." "No." "Good." He started walking, a little faster than before. After nearly 5 minutes of silence, I remembered the paper. Rule 5. If a visitor asks where the lower valley is, tell them you don't know. Even if you do. I caught up beside him. So, there isn't a lower valley? He kept looking straight ahead. There isn't one visitors should ever find. That evening, I unpacked the rest of my gear inside the ranger cabin. The housing area sat well away from the main visitor sections. Just a handful of small cabins hidden among tall pines. Peaceful, quiet, exactly what I wanted. Around sunset, someone knocked on my door. 3 quick taps. I opened it. A ranger stood outside. Young, maybe early 30s. Dark hair, friendly smile, brand new green uniform. He extended one hand. "Daniel Mercer, nice finally meeting you." Something about that sentence made my stomach tighten. I hadn't told him my name. Before I could respond, he smiled wider. "We'll work together soon." Then he simply walked away. I watched him disappear between the cabins. A minute later, Owen walked up carrying a toolbox. "Everything settled?" "Yeah." I hesitated. "Who's the ranger in cabin 3? He frowned. "What ranger?" "The guy who just left." Owen looked toward cabin 3. The porch was empty. No one's assigned there. He introduced himself. "What did he say?" "He said..." I stopped mid-sentence. My blood turned cold. The first line of the paper flashed through my mind. If another ranger greets you by name before introducing themselves, politely walk away. I slowly looked back toward the empty cabin. The porch light flickered once, twice. Then, through the front window, I saw someone standing inside, watching me. He was still smiling. And although I couldn't hear him through the glass, I could see his lips moving, slowly, carefully, repeating my name over and over again. The man in the window didn't blink. He just stood there, smiling. His lips kept forming the same word. "Daniel." Again. "Daniel." Again. "Daniel." The strange part wasn't that he knew my name anymore. It was that his mouth was moving just a fraction of a second before I imagined hearing it in my head. Like my brain was trying to catch up with him. I took one step toward cabin 3. Owen grabbed the back of my vest. "Don't." His voice was calm. Too calm. I pointed toward the window. "He's right there." "I know. You can see him?" "I can." "Then why aren't we?" "Because if we walk over there, he'll invite us inside." A chill spread through me. "What happens if he does?" Owen looked away from the cabin. "I've never asked, and I plan to keep it that way." When I looked back, the window was empty. The porch light had stopped flickering. Cabin 3 looked abandoned again. Dust coated the steps. Spider webs hung from the railing, like nobody had lived there in years. That night, I unfolded the unofficial rules again. For the first time, I wasn't smiling. Rule 1 had already proven itself, or at least something very close to it had. I wanted to believe there was an explanation. A prank, some elaborate initiation. But nobody could have gotten inside that abandoned cabin without us seeing them, especially not without leaving footprints. The ground around the porch had been covered in fresh pine needles, completely undisturbed. I slept with the cabin lights on. The next morning started normally enough. Tourists flooded the valley. The shuttle buses were packed. Lost children, minor injuries, questions about bears, questions about waterfalls. The usual. Around noon, Owen and I were assigned to check several backcountry trailheads after reports of illegal camping. It was routine work. The farther we drove from the visitor center, the quieter everything became. Eventually, we reached a small parking area used mostly by experienced hikers. Only 2 vehicles remained, both covered in dust. No people. As we started down the trail, Owen suddenly asked, "You still carrying the paper?" "The rules." "Yeah, they're in my backpack. Keep them." I thought they weren't official. "They aren't." "Then why?" "Because whoever wrote them was trying to keep us alive. About an hour later, we met the only hiker we'd seen all afternoon. Older man, late 60s, camera around his neck, walking stick, friendly enough. He stopped us with a smile. "Afternoon, Rangers." "Afternoon." He looked relieved. "I've been looking for someone." Owen nodded. "Need directions?" Actually, the man hesitated. "I've seen the same woman 3 times. Blue jacket, red backpack. Every time I catch up, she's suddenly farther ahead." Owen didn't even ask another question. "Which direction?" The man pointed uphill. Without another word, Owen thanked him and started walking. Not uphill, back toward the truck. I hurried after him. "We're not checking." "No. What if someone's lost?" "They aren't." "How do you know?" He stopped. "Because lost people don't keep getting farther away." Halfway back to the parking lot, something changed. At first I couldn't figure out what. Then it hit me. There were no sounds. No birds. No squirrels. No insects. Even the breeze through the trees had stopped. Every animal around us had gone silent. Rule 3. I immediately pulled my ranger hat off. Owen did the same. Neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavy, not empty, like the forest itself was holding its breath. 30 seconds passed. Then, branches cracked somewhere behind us. Not one branch. Many. Something large moved through the trees, keeping pace with us. I wanted to turn around. Owen kept walking. Slowly. Eyes fixed ahead. Another crack. Closer. Then another. Whatever followed us never stepped onto the trail. It stayed hidden just beyond the trees, always matching our speed. The silence continued for what felt like forever. Finally, a woodpecker hammered against a tree somewhere in the distance. One sharp series of knocks. Instantly the forest came back to life. Birds sang. Wind returned. Leaves rustled. The pressure vanished. Only then did Owen put his hat back on. I copied him. "What was that?" He answered without slowing down. "I don't know. Does it happen often?" "Often enough." That evening curiosity got the better of me. I visited the station archives. Old ranger reports filled several filing cabinets. Most were boring. Weather damage, trail closures, wildlife incidents. Exactly what you'd expect, until I found a thin folder with no label. Inside were handwritten reports. None of them existed in the digital records. The oldest dated back nearly 40 years. One sentence appeared again and again. Different handwriting, different years. Same warning. Animals always know before we do. Another report read, 3 hikers insisted another ranger directed them off the main trail. No ranger was assigned to that sector. Another visitor requested directions to the lower valley. Subject missing 2 hours later. Search suspended at sunset. My pulse quickened. These weren't ghost stories. These were official incident reports. Someone had simply removed them from the filing system. I kept reading. Then one photograph slipped from between the pages. Black and white, taken decades ago. It showed a group of Yosemite Rangers standing outside the main station. 8 men, 1 woman, all smiling. Something caught my eye immediately. One ranger stood slightly apart from the others. Gray uniform, not green, gray. Rule 7. I looked closer. Every other ranger cast a shadow across the ground. The one in gray didn't. Finding anything interesting? The voice nearly made me drop the photograph. I spun around. Hale stood behind me. District Chief Richard Hale. I hadn't heard him enter. He looked down at the photo. His expression changed instantly. Without asking, he took it from my hands, slipped it back into the folder, closed it, locked the cabinet. "You shouldn't be in here. I was just..." "I know." He lowered his voice. "Forget what you saw." The gray uniform. His eyes met mine. For the first time since I'd arrived, he looked genuinely frightened. There has never been a gray ranger uniform. Before I could respond, a dispatcher shouted from the front office, "Hale, we've got another one." The chief closed his eyes, almost like he'd expected it. He turned toward the radio room. As I followed, I heard the dispatcher replaying a 911 call through the speakers. A woman was crying. "My husband." He went after another ranger. He said the man knew a shortcut. "We've been following him for 20 minutes. I can't see the main trail anymore." The dispatcher looked up. "They're sending GPS coordinates now." Hale glanced at the screen. His face went pale. What is it? I asked. He swallowed once before answering. The coordinates are in the middle of El Capitan. I frowned. That's impossible. He nodded slowly. I know. Then every radio in the station crackled at the exact same moment. One voice came through. Calm, clear, almost cheerful. Good evening, Rangers. My shift is about to begin. Every experienced ranger in the room froze. Not one of them reached for a microphone. Not one answered, because every single one of them recognized the voice. And somehow, without anyone saying his name, I knew it belonged to the man smiling from cabin 3 that nobody answered the radio. Not Hale, not dispatch, not Owen, not a single ranger moved. The voice remained calm, patient. Good evening, Rangers. I'll be covering the eastern trails tonight. A burst of static followed, then silence. The dispatcher immediately unplugged the base radio from the wall. Not turn it off, unplugged it. Another ranger removed the batteries from every handheld radio stacked on the charging rack. Nobody spoke while they did it. The room felt like an emergency shelter moments before a tornado hit. Finally, I broke the silence. Who was that? No one answered. I looked at Owen. He rubbed both hands across his face before quietly saying, "Shift change." I frowned. What shift? He looked toward the windows. The one that starts after hours. 5 minutes later, Hale called every available ranger into the briefing room. The blinds were closed. The doors locked. Maps covered one wall. He pointed at several sections highlighted in red. Effective immediately. Trails 12, 14, and 18 are closed. One ranger raised an eyebrow. Visitors are still out there. I know. What about search and rescue? They'll wait until daylight. I couldn't stay quiet. If someone is actually hurt. Hale interrupted me. If someone is still themselves by sunrise, we'll find them. The room stayed silent. Then he looked directly at me. Mercer, you've been here less than a week. Tonight you'll learn why those rules exist. Instead of sending US home, they assigned us to observation posts. No patrols, no rescues, no trail checks. Just watch. I ended up sharing a fire lookout with Owen overlooking a stretch of forest east of the valley. The tower itself was modern. Steel frame, solar panels, radio equipment. Nothing unusual. The climb took nearly 15 minutes. By the time we reached the top, darkness had swallowed the valley below. Yosemite looked beautiful at night. Tiny campfires, moonlight reflecting off granite cliffs. Thousands of stars overhead. It almost made me forget the radio transmission. Almost. Owen poured 2 cups of coffee, then opened an old logbook sitting beside the radio. Every page contained handwritten notes. Most weren't weather observations. They were sightings. 11:43 p.m., 2 whistles near Cathedral Creek. 12:11 a.m., gray uniform observed on North Ridge. 1:02 a.m., additional lights visible in abandoned campground. 2:17 a.m., voices beneath Half Dome. None of it made sense. Until I reached the final page. Across the bottom, someone had written, "Never count them." I frowned. Count who? Owen immediately closed the book. You weren't supposed to read that. Read what? The last page. What? He didn't answer. Instead, he walked over to the observation window. Come here. I joined him. He pointed toward a campground nearly a mile away. Dozens of tents glowed softly beneath lantern light. Families laughed around campfires. Children chased each other. Perfectly normal. How many tents? The question caught me off guard. I don't know. Guess. I looked again. Maybe 30? 40? I started counting automatically. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Halfway through, I frowned. Something wasn't right. The number kept changing. 32. No. 36. Wait. 41. I blinked. The arrangement shifted again. Some tents seemed to appear where empty ground had been seconds earlier. Others vanished. No, not vanished. They were never there. I rubbed my eyes. The campground looked normal again. Then I noticed something horrifying. People weren't moving between tents. The tents were moving around the people. Very slowly. Almost too slowly to notice. I stepped back from the window. What? Owen pulled the blinds shut. I told you, never count them. At exactly midnight, The lookout radio crackled. Not the official emergency channel. A different frequency, one that hadn't been active all evening. A calm male voice began reading names, one after another. No explanations, just names. Michael Dawson. Pause. Linda Harris. Pause. Thomas Ruiz. Pause. Each name was followed by silence, like someone waiting for an answer. I checked the equipment. The microphone wasn't transmitting. Nobody should have been able to hear us. Then, the voice spoke another name. Mine. Daniel Mercer. I froze. Owen reached over, switched the radio completely off. The speaker continued. Daniel Mercer, please acknowledge. The radio had no power, no batteries. The cord hung disconnected beside the desk. It kept talking anyway. A light appeared outside, not from another tower, not from a vehicle. A flashlight, moving through the forest below. Then another, then another. Soon dozens of lights wandered between the trees. Search teams, at least. That's what they looked like. I grabbed binoculars. Every light belonged to a ranger. Green uniforms, campaign hats, walking silently through the forest. There aren't that many night patrols. There aren't any. Owen took the binoculars from me. Looked once. His expression hardened. They're early. What do you mean? Instead of answering, he locked the tower door, then slid a heavy steel bar across it. My heartbeat sped up. Owen, what are they? He finally looked at me. They're not coming up here. You sound very sure. I'm trying to. The footsteps began less than a minute later. Heavy boots, climbing the wooden stairs. One person. No. Two. No. Many. Perfectly synchronized. Thump. 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 No voices. No flashlights. Only boots. The tower shook slightly beneath their weight. They reached the landing outside. Stopped. Then, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Exactly like before. Nobody moved. The knocking came again. Then a familiar voice spoke through the door. Hale sent me. I looked at Owen. He slowly shook his head. The voice continued. We've got injured hikers. Open the door. It was Hale's voice. Perfectly accurate. Then Maria's. Owen, it's safe. Then dispatch. Then my mother's voice. Then my father's. Then my own. Open it. The handle turned gently. Once. Twice. The steel bar held. Silence followed. Long enough that I almost believed they'd left. Then something scratched softly against the outside wall. Not claws. Not metal. Fingernails. Hundreds of them. Dragging slowly around the tower. The sound circled us again and again. Like whatever stood outside was feeling every inch of the building. Looking for a way in. Then, all at once, the scratching stopped. Owen relaxed slightly. Maybe they're gone. Before I could answer, something tapped gently on the lookout window behind us. We both turned, standing on the outside observation platform. 40 feet above the ground was the ranger from cabin 3, still smiling, still spotless. His gray uniform looked almost silver beneath the moonlight. He raised one finger, pointed past us, toward the radio. The disconnected speaker crackled one final time. Not with static, with a voice I'd never heard before. Old, weak, terrified. If he can see you, you've already been assigned. Then every light in the tower went out at once. And in the darkness, something inside the room took a slow breath that neither Owen nor I had made. The emergency lights flickered on a second later. Dim red bulbs cast long shadows across the lookout. The room looked exactly the same. The desk, the map table, the radio, the coffee mugs. Except there were 3 of us. Owen and I stood frozen near the window. Someone else stood in the corner behind the radio console. A ranger, green uniform, campaign hat pulled low over his face. He wasn't there when the lights went out. I was certain of it. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. He simply stood with both hands folded behind his back like he'd been waiting for inspection. Owen, my voice came out as a whisper. He didn't answer. Without taking his eyes off the stranger, he slowly reached for the shotgun mounted beside the door. The stranger spoke before Owen touched it. Rule 8. I frowned. There are only 7. He nodded once. There were. His voice sounded wrong. Not distorted. Layered. Like several people were speaking the same sentence at the exact same time. Owen finally found his voice. You don't belong here. The ranger tilted his head. No, you do. The room suddenly became colder. My breath fogged in front of me. The windows frosted over from the inside. The stranger slowly lifted one hand. He was holding a laminated card. It looked exactly like mine, except it wasn't blank. It had dozens of rules, some handwritten, some typed, some scratched into the plastic itself. He held it toward me. You've only seen the first page. The lookout radio screamed with feedback, not static. A long, painful shriek that made my ears ring. Then dispatch finally came through. It was the real dispatcher. I knew because she sounded terrified. Unit 9, respond. If anyone is inside, look out for. Leave immediately.